Hi everybody, I am Sarah Cray and I teach watercolor and today we are doing our glass flowers project.
Ooh. Dang it. I
Ah.
always do the ooh. Are we do ahs? Are we awe people?
Yes, we're all
Why
people.
don't you go ahead and do it one more time?
Okay, we are doing the glass flowers project.
Ah. There it
Thank you.
is.
We have Michael working the cameras.
Hello.
And we are going to be doing this project in 4 steps. So our very first step is we are going to sketch our flowers and then paint our background. Our second step is we are going to paint the flowers using multiple techniques that I'm super excited to talk to you about. Our third step is the rest of the flowers. And our fourth step is just detail lines. So this box or this project is from our Let's Make Art History Volume 3 box, and we are celebrating Dale Chihuly. He is serving as inspiration for this project, and he is a glass blower and does amazing work. And this project specifically is based off of his installation sculpture in Seattle called Glass House. And I'm going to have Michael put up a picture of it right here. So it's essentially this like glass house with these red and orange and yellow glass kind of flowers that it's like 40 feet tall and 100 feet long installation near the ceiling. And so I basically am taking that, we're going super close up. So we're pretending that the sky is blue because that's what essentially the background is these clear windows to the sky. And then we're recreating these glass flowers.
Super cool.
So this project is super fun and loose. This is a great time to experiment with new techniques and to try something different. It's so good for your creativity to let loose once in a while and do projects that are just for fun and not necessarily so technically sound. Okay? What?
So technically.
Totally sound. Okay, so I taped off my paper. I put it portrait wise, and I'm going to take a pencil and I'm just going to start sketching out the flowers. Now, the flowers are essentially organic in shape, which means they're kind of like rounded and have a little bit of wave to them. The other thing that we have to keep in mind is this is a 3-dimensional sculpture. So some of these flowers are turned on their side. So whenever that happens, you kind of just do a half circle and then a wavy line on top. They are also layered. So we'll see some behind, we'll see some in front. And I'm just going to kind of go across my composition. Now, because we have no outline and we're sketching this, yours is going to look very different from mine. And that is a celebration, my friends. There's nothing to be nervous about. This is play. It's just play. Try to eliminate gaps in between. And this is actually great because for people who like to do like floral paintings, like flowers just kind of in the center going out, we have a tendency to leave a lot of gaps in between our flowers and our leaves and things like this. But in reality, they overlap because they're 3-dimensional things. And it's just better compositionally not to have these gaps within our painting. So things like this is a great practice for you to be comfortable overlapping things and not leaving these big gaps. So after I do that, that feels good. This seems like too big of a gap, so let's add one there. This can be a new one. And I actually want that to go out. Okay, that's it. If you want to erase, like let's say you just drew over some of the areas, then you can go ahead and erase some lines of what would be kind of hidden and underneath. Okay. Now what we are going to do is our oath.
That's right.
If you can raise your right hand and repeat after me, I promise to be kind to myself.
I promise to be kind to myself.
I promise not to compare my work.
Promise not to compare my work.
And I promise to have fun.
And I promise to have fun.
Thank you. Okay, so I'm going to start with doing the background, and I'm going to use just my wash brush and my sea blue color. I didn't say what colors we were using. We are using sea blue, lemon yellow, and red. So just 3 colors, but please use whatever colors you have. The brushes that I'm using for this project are a round 2, round 6, round 12, and 1-inch wash.
Nice.
And then I also have my Neocolors, which are the bonus items for this box, ready to go. Okay. Now we can paint.
It's one of those days.
It's one of those days. All right, so I'm adding water to my sea blue because I want it to be a light to medium value. And then I'm going to make sure that all of my edges are taped down so I get a nice clean edge. I'm going to take that sea blue and I'm just going to put it in. Now, because these are organic shape, it's a little bit tricky kind of working your way around them. Do your best. If they overlap a little, it's not a big deal. I'm trying to make this wash even, which means I don't have a lot of hard lines in between. And how you go about doing that is you want to work fairly quickly and you want to kind of keep working the areas back and forth, kind of blending out the paint that you just put down. Now, again, if they overlap a little bit, that's okay, but try not to have it overlap too much because with watercolor, we will be able to see the paint, like the blue underneath, if we were to say do like yellow or red. Okay, so that feels pretty good. And let's go ahead and do the opposite side. Now, after I've painted this, if I were to let this sit and dry for a second and then come back in and just do like a blue section right there, I will get blooms. Blooms are hard edges within your painting or wash, and they are created by having an uneven disbursement of water and different drying times. So if you want something to be a smooth wash, then you usually want to like just do it in one go and not come back to it unless you do another layer on top of the entire thing. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Now, I do need to acknowledge that this is not 100% cotton paper. This is like a wood pulp paper. 100% cotton paper does a little bit better job evenly dispersing the water and thus eliminating blooms. So I mean, personally, I like the look of blooms. I'm not anti-bloom. I think they add visual interest to your painting and I really kind of embrace them. But if you do not like them at all and you think they're just the worst thing in the world, then maybe investing in 100% cotton paper is the right move for you. And then I'm just going in using the edge of my wash brush to kind of paint in between the section so I don't have any white gaps.
I have watched you paint a lot, as you know. Um, I've always wanted to have you do like a postcard sized one. Fill up your butcher tray with water and then just like drop paint in it so it's colored water and then
Mm,
submerge the paper in and
I've
have
done that.
that be the wash. Does it work well?
Yeah, it's really cool actually. And I've illustrated a few books before, and on some of them, like there's quotes with paintings, and sometimes there's just like a watercolor wash that the quotes go on. That's what I do. I usually just do one color, but yeah,
Nice.
it's very cool. Okay, so that's it. That's step one. Now we're going to move on to step two. And what we're going to do, and this is just such an excellent way, especially if you're starting watercolor, to get used to how the color and water interact together on the wet technique. So if you are familiar with like our carrots project, which is personally one of my favorite projects ever, it's a very similar technique where we're going to, paint a section and then drag it to another section and drop color in and really let the paint and the water do the work for us. Um, Now, while we let that dry, let's actually look at a little bit of Chihuly's work.
How did you find this person?
Well, I learned about Chihuly originally in one of my art history classes
Okay.
because he is amazing. Um, but oh, sorry, this is such a good look at his glass sculptures.
Wow.
So Chihuly is really interesting because his background is more in like interior design. So he got his degree in interior design. He also got his degree in sculpture. And then while he was getting his degree in interior design and sculpture, that's when he started to experiment with glass and glass blowing. Look at this.
They're incredible.
Now, these are installation pieces. That means that they're kind of like part of a room experience. Like it's like a three-dimensional experience instead of just like on a platform in front of you. But let's look at some of his glass works that aren't like an installation. So let's go here to this book. And we're just letting our background wash dry. That's why we're talking about this right now. So look at these. like the use of color, the shape. He uses drawings to communicate what he's trying to do before he starts, kind of getting out his ideas.
What a crazy different world to be a glass blower,
Yes.
you know? That's so cool.
It's so stunning. It's just like, look at that. And I feel like there's such a connection to nature with these,
Mhm.
the shape of them, the colors, different things like that. They're just so beautiful. And actually, this glass house that we're talking about, he has like um, a whole installation area in Seattle. It's called Chihuly Garden and Glass. So this is in it. There's also some glass sculptures throughout, outside and inside different areas, um, which is just such an amazing experience. And next time, or if we ever go to Seattle, I really want to go and see this in person because it's just so beautiful and such a different way to look at art. Okay, so for the wet on wet technique, what I'm going to do here is I'm going to play with different hues of yellow and orange and red just throughout. So let's start with wetting the entire area of the flower. And we're going to do it one at a time to start with. And then while it's nice and wet, I'm going to grab a color. You can do any color you want. I'm just going to touch
Whoa.
it. And just look at how that moves in there. Beautiful.
So cool.
And now that we've seen some of his glass works, like how perfect is this wet on wet technique
Yeah.
with some of those shapes and those color movements? I was just like, oh, this is perfect. This is so good. Okay, and then what we're gonna do to really kind of like play into that wet on wet is I'm actually gonna take my round 12, rinse it, and then I'm just gonna touch this red into this one, and I'm gonna turn this orange. So I'm letting that color kind of bleed through into this. And I'm gonna grab some yellow and some red. And let's touch some orange in there. And look at it just move. Now, the more you touch in an area, the more paint is going to move and build up there. And if you just do a little bit, it's not going to move as much. You see what I'm saying?
Mhm.
And then another thing I really love to do when it's wet like this is I like to drop in another color and just let it do the work for me. So I'm going to take some yellow. And what happens if we just drop in yellow here?
You're such a rebel.
Feeling edgy. I mean, I just love it so much. Okay, so there's something that you can do here to create thin lines. Like, let's say we want to do some thin line details on our flowers. You can go back in with the darker value and do that. Or you can take the handle of your brush here and actually draw with it. It's going to create an indent in the paper. And that is going to make that paint seep into that indent, creating a darker value.
Cool.
Isn't that cool?
Yeah. It reminds me of our 8-year-old daughter. Last night we were eating potatoes or something, and she was eating them with the handle part of her fork. That part. I don't know why, but
You never know with Luna.
she's too much.
So you can do this before you add the paint or after. So if I were to do it before, let's do it here. So I'm going to kind of start, and it's going to make a sound that you might not like.
Is it called embossing?
I guess this would be embossing.
Ugh, that noise is. I'm wearing headphones that amplify it, so not good.
And I'm just going to take my round 6. So just flip over your brush, drop in water, then take some red paint or whatever color you want. Kind of drop it in. And then as it kind of dries, you'll see the paint color kind of go into those areas. You can see it show up pretty nicely right here.
Yeah, that is awesome.
Let's do a yellow here. Now this one I want to stay mostly yellow, so it's okay if like a little bit of the color bleeds, but I'm going to be a little bit more aware of what lines I'm touching. And let's do Now, let's say that you want to start painting glass. Glass is one of those things. Those lines didn't show up over here. I wonder why. I'm going to try it one more time with doing the handle before, and maybe it's just something you have to do after, but I thought that you could do it both. So when it comes to painting glass, you essentially, like, the biggest thing that comes with painting glass or anything metallic, it's actually very similar. The process of painting metallic things and glass things is light informs so much of glass, and it's all value shifts. That's painting metallics and that's painting glass. So what you want to do whenever you're trying to paint glass, or you're trying to, is you need to eliminate from your mind that it's glass, and look at the different values that are just there, and just recreate the different values that you see within that area. And when it comes to metallics and glass, you are going to have extreme value change. You're going to have a lightest highlight and you're going to have the darkest value, and it's just going to shift within there depending on how the light is hitting the glass and how it moves. Now, one thing that I really love about this installation piece is this is glass on top of a glass roof. And so, depending on what time of day you see it and the weather, it's going to greatly impact the overall effect that you have in this room. Like, this is a clear blue sky. What happens if this is gray and muddy? What happens to this when this is sunset colors? You will have a different experience every time you see this installation piece, because the outside, the thing that we can't control, is actually a huge collaborator in the overall effect of this piece. Okay, so I'm going to keep doing this wet on wet. You guys are in control of how much color bleeds or not. If you don't want the colors to bleed, then just don't touch the wet areas together. If you do want the colors to bleed, then go ahead and let them touch. I think it's so good for us to do projects that remind us of why we love watercolor. And this, for me, this brings back that kind of feeling of being so enamored and surprised by it. It's not like I can control every single aspect. And that to me is exciting. I love that the water just moves and the paint moves within the water, and I never quite know where it's going to end up or what part will accidentally touch and bleed and move into something else. It's just a surprise, and it changes every time. I mean, like, as it dries. So when I first put down paint, it's going to move as I keep adding paint, and when it dries. So when I go back, I can say, "Wow, look at that!
So cool.
That's so cool. Look at how this white kind of bled in there." Like, just love it. Now, if you want to, let's actually try the handle thing again. I'm gonna do it one more time because see how the marks didn't appear on that at all. So let me try it one more time, and then I'll do it with doing it after. So I'm just kind of doing wavy lines into it. Now, if you want a strong yellow center or orange center and a mostly like white inside, then you don't have to wet the entire area. You would just wet the edges. Like, wherever you want the color to go, only wet that portion. We'll just see. I don't see it moving that one. So let's do some lines in this one using my handle. There it goes. Okay, so then you need to do the indents after you put in the paint, it looks like. And if you want, so when I pulled from the center here, that red got dragged and then dropped in here. If you want to keep that kind of like puddle, you would start in the center and work your way out. Ah, look how cool it is. I just love it. and keep going. So you can go as fast or as slow as you want. I'm going to start moving a little bit more fast. And try and break up. This is an excellent exercise in understanding um, like how color affects composition. For example, if I were to do all of the flowers yellow in one area, that's going to create a strong eye pull within my composition. So then, like doing something like this is a great way for you to practice dispersing the color out kind of evenly, so you're not creating these chunks within your composition that become distracting. Now, as you can see in some of the floral work here, is that there's kind of like these organic shapes, and then there's also these kind of like lines. So you can do it while it's nice and wet like this, and whenever you do it when it's wet, it's going to diffuse out and soften out. Part of that feels like glass to me,
Yeah.
that kind of like swirly movement.
Wait, the kind of what? Can you do that one more time?
The swirly movement of
Okay.
glass.
Good. Just making sure.
Now, what I think is really interesting, I mean, about Chihuly's work is it's not just about creating this glass sculpture. It's what is the overall experience of the viewer seeing this sculpture? He's really thinking about all of these outside elements that inform it with these installation pieces. So it's not just about this glass piece standing. It is what is the environment? How is it photographed? How can we use these outside sources to inform the work itself, which I think is probably due to part of his like experience with interior design. You know what I mean? Like all of these um, elements that we have within us can inform the art that we create. Okay, let's do orange. Feeling orangey. Um, the other interesting thing about Chihuly's work is there's always this kind of question in the art world between like fine art and craft. And he kind of plays with this a little bit. Like this is fine art to me, right? This is
Right.
beautiful. But glass blowing the same as woodworking or any of that kind of thing has always been associated with more craft. It's basically function and utility, where, fine art is kind of more about expressing emotions or maybe a decorative element. It's kind of like superfluous. Is that the right word? Did I
Sorry.
say that right?
Sorry, I was yawning. Superfluous.
Superfluous a little bit. Not that it's not important, but just like craft, there's like a function to it. So like glass blowing kind of has like these people use it for, like creating bowls and for like that kind of stuff. So it just kind of makes you question like what is considered fine art, what is considered craft, how and when do they overlap, is one better than the other? And it's like this kind of line that's fun to play with of like, yeah, these bowls you can put fruit in and put it on your kitchen table and there it is. It can also sit in a museum, but you can also take a Picasso painting and cover a hole in the wall.
Right.
You know what I mean? Like
If you have a lot of money.
but that's the thing, is like that would be the utility of hanging something, is like covering a hole in the wall, which I totally have done before.
The electrical panel
Yes,
covering the panel.
exactly. And you can use this for utility and function, or you can put it in a museum and just appreciate it the same way that you appreciate a painting.
Well, here's the Michael Cray philosophical question of the day trademark.
Okay.
Do you think that categorization is ultimately helpful or harmful? When you start to think of, craft versus fine art, or even in music, when you get into like, I mean, my example is metal, but they have all these subcategories of it's this kind of thing, it's that kind of thing, and then people argue about does this fit? Like, is that helpful?
I think we as humans love categorizing things because it makes us feel like we're in control. I think it makes it easier to speak and define things and understand. But do I think it's necessary or even helpful? Not really, because so much of what we do as people is we create these arbitrary rules that just kind of do a hierarchy of importance that are all based off of nothing.
Right.
You know what I mean? And I think sometimes we use these things to separate ourselves from each other, um, as a sense of control. But are they helpful? No.
I feel like
You know?
it's almost damaging to the artist when the community labels something as X, Y, or Z, because then the artist feels responsible to people who like their work to
Hmm.
keep creating that labeled item. For example, Sarah Cray used to paint animals with flower crowns.
Hmm.
And I feel like for a long time that was the thing and people kept expecting that. But like there's a point where you're like, I don't feel like painting flower crowns anymore, but my audience likes this or
Hmm.
whatever.
Hmm.
I feel like that happens all across the spectrum of art, being labeled as something.
It does. And it's hard because if what we'll learn as you guys watch and paint through these videos is people don't like change. Critics don't like it when people go outside and do things a little bit differently, at least at first. And then they kind of get used to the idea and they're like, oh, okay, this is cool. You know what I mean? And I think the same is true. I mean, I think we want to separate because it's just easier to sometimes pick a niche, right? To be like, okay, I'm an artist and I'm starting out, and people are going to know me. Like Van Gogh wanted to be known for painting sunflowers, but did he only paint sunflowers? No. But sometimes it's easier to start that way. It doesn't feel so overwhelming. Sometimes it's you get lost in what it could be. And so I think by labeling and defining things, it can narrow it down and make it easier for you to create. But as an artist and a creative, like I'm reading, I just finished reading The Creative Way. I think that's it by Rick Rubin. Such a good read, by the way. Highly recommend it. But basically, he talked about a lot of things in there. But one of the things that he said is like artists have to create work as if they've never experienced any kind of success or anything before, because that's going to mess up your process. When you think that when you create art for external sources, then it shifts. And once you find success, it's more scary to create artwork, because you now have an audience. You have people watching you and people that have an opinion. When you have nothing to lose, you can create anything. And being able to create with nothing to lose is like the most pure form of creation. It's just complete freedom. It's not relying on anybody, nobody's watching you. You have anything you want. And essentially, as artists, if it's your profession to create, you have to continue creating as if you have nothing to lose, because that is when you break the rules. That's when you're willing to stop painting the floral crowns on the animals, or stop painting using natural colors and using bold colors, or using glass as a fine art medium. That's when you start experimenting and doing new things and changing how people view something.
Hmm.
Okay. So we are about, I think I need a strong red there. Okay. Look how beautiful this
Yeah,
is. Like
really good.
it's so good. So we are going to go back and we're on the last one, the last step, and we're going to do details. Now, at this point, we want our painting to be dry or mostly dry because we want these kind of marks to stay dark and stay a little bit sharp. So for your Neocolor, if you want to go in and add some of these lines throughout here, you can do that. You can do it with your Neocolor wet or dry. Don't be afraid of the texture that it brings. If you want to use the handle of your brush to do some of these marks, you can. But I just want to call attention to how thick those are. They're
Yeah.
not super thin marks. And so I do this technique sometimes, but not all the time, because I feel like I can get a better, thinner line with like around 2 or around 6. So then I'm kind of going to increase my values here. So, like for this red flower that I'm doing here, I'm going to take red and maybe a tiny bit of sea blue, which is going to create kind of like a brown purpley color. But we just want it to be a darker value. And then I'm going to go and kind of sharpen the edge here.
To return to this one more time, we were talking about just previous to this, labeling things. In the last video, which one? Picasso. If you watched the Picasso one already, we talked about this. But when people use being overly technical as kind of a defense mechanism, like, I am a real artist, look how technically I can paint. I
Hmm.
feel like that same vein, from an artist point of view, makes you want to label your own art as very niche. Like, well, I'm a painter who specializes in blah, de blah, 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 because then it's hard for people to critique you. It's hard
Hmm.
to have someone be like, well, that doesn't look normal. You're like, well, you just don't understand the niche of art that I do. And I feel like, again, with experience and with learning who you are as an artist and maybe letting go of those fears, that nicheness kind of goes away in the same way of you being obsessive about technicalities goes away. Do you think so or no?
I don't know. I think that might be too broad of a stroke for me
Okay.
to totally agree
Okay.
with. But what I will agree with is that usually when people are defensive of their work in any capacity, whether it's you don't understand or I'm so good or all of that kind of stuff, what that really is that's people catering to their insecurities in the way of, you know, and let's like push this to like my experience, right? So like if people have an issue with how much I talk during tutorials and how I choose to teach and all of this kind of stuff, at first my heckles go up. You don't understand. Well, I'm trying to do this. I want to feel like your friend, so I'm going to talk to you like I'm your friend, all of this stuff. But really what I'm doing is I'm over explaining. And if I felt secure and I try, and I'm not perfect at this, it's a struggle, but I'm working on it. If I feel good about what I'm doing and how I'm doing it, then whatever those people say has nothing to do with what I'm doing.
Right.
And they can say those things, and I can just say, okay, well, go ahead and I hope that you make your own video tutorials and choose to do it how you think it should be done,
Right.
and let me leave. Because the reality is, everybody's a critic. Everybody is a critic, but it's not the critic who counts because they're not doing the work. I think that's a quote by Theodore Roosevelt.
Old Teddy.
It's not the critic who counts. It's the person who's in the arena doing the work, trying it, putting themselves out there. I mean, when you do that, then you can come and talk to me about stuff.
Yeah,
But if
being a critic is so easy.
it is because and unfortunately when it comes to the internet, social media, all of these things, everybody has a platform to talk and critique and all of those things. And sometimes they're valid. I don't want to say that criticism is not valid. It can be a learning opportunity to improve, and feedback is good. But also, if I'm not if I'm not okay with what I'm doing, then I will spend that time defending myself, or not being able to hear what's being said to take that improvement. Simultaneously, though, people sometimes aren't asking for critiques. So, like, unless people ask for it, why don't you go ahead and keep that to yourself?
It's hard. I feel like, again, they feel like they have the right to be critical of everything, right? Because you're a human and I can like that or not like it how I want. But the reality is, I feel like to be a good critic, you have to be so not educated, but just experienced in what you're critiquing for it to be a valuable,
Sure.
you know what I
Yes.
mean? But
Yes.
like a lot of as an artist, when you hear a critique, you are accepting it as the person critiquing me is so skilled at this or so valid in what they're saying. But the reality is, a lot of times, they're not, and you shouldn't take their critique as such.
Exactly. Exactly. So, like,
If your professor is critiquing you,
and that's why, yes, that's why, like, if you create an environment or a group of friends, whether that's through art school, whether that's through your own community, whether it's whatever, you usually want to do it with people that you trust and respect. you know that they have this experience that it's valuable to listen to, or you have experience with them that you know that when they critique you, they're not trying to bring you down. They're trying to improve your work. And I will say that there's a difference between the two. There are some people who critique in the way to just bring you down. But then there are people who are critiquing in the way where they're really just trying to improve what you're doing. And it takes trust to get to that spot where you feel comfortable um, critiquing someone or taking criticism from someone. Um, so all of that is to say, if you guys are starting to paint, trying new things, all of this stuff, and you have a neighbor named Susan
The art
who's
friend.
the art professional police friend who's just like, oh, you used a tutorial,
Oh, an outline.
an outline, cool, that doesn't count. They don't really get to say that, you know what I mean? And I guarantee you that the people who care about what you're doing and are not speaking in the way of defending themselves or their own insecurities, they will always be supportive of what it is that you're trying to do. I mean, like, does that make sense of what
Yeah.
I'm saying?
Yeah,
Of
yeah, yeah.
like, if for me, I feel really good about who I am as an artist and what I'm doing and all of this stuff. So when people show me their artwork, I'm like, you're great. You're amazing. And my job is not to break you down so I feel better about where I am, because that's what so much of it is. And I can say that from experience. When I was in art school, I was very competitive. I really defined my value based on being the best one. And in my mind, mentally, I'd be like, you're going to try and critique me and your painting looks like that, which is so terrible because I missed an opportunity to listen to what they had to say. But the only reason why I responded with that way was because I was insecure with myself and I was competing and creating these rules that weren't there and thinking that if I could be the best artist, then I could win art and be worthy of love and all of these things. But when you feel good about what you're doing, you just support. And then when people are like, hey, I trust you, I trust your judgment, what can I do to make this better? That's when your artist friend can say, let's try painting something without following a tutorial. It's going to be super hard, but you can do it. Let's do it together. You know what I mean? Like, that's support. And that's like good criticism. Okay. Um, we're like done.
It's so beautiful. I love the white spot on the top one.
Yes, and this is great because it shows you here that sometimes the white of the paper, this really bright white value, does so much. In our minds, we think we have to cover everything with watercolor, but having these moments of bright light really add to it. Please know that you can do this as a way to experiment with mark making new supplies and new color palettes. It's a great way for you to understand how values and paint to water ratio work within this painting. Um, when it comes to Dale Chihuly and his work, I really hope that you take some time to look at it and just absorb it, learn from it, and understand that art can come in many different ways and mediums and experiences. And one is not better than the other, and different things are going to resonate with you than others. And that's what makes it wonderful. It's based off of your own experience. So, please take some time to look through these works. I bookmarked this page because I just wanted to show you the physicality and all of the steps involved in creating glasswork. You heat it up. I think it starts back here. You heat it up, you roll it in glass, you roll it in more glass, you heat that up again. Then you start to shape it. Then you take the shaping and you shape it more. Then you shape it more. And it's just like, look at these crazy tools and all of the people involved in creating a piece like this. I mean, this is real stuff. You know what I mean? It's so cool.
Nah, I'd say it's craft. I think you could probably do better. I don't know.
So you make glass?
So it's
Cool.
just glass then? Like a bowl? Oh.
Okay. Thank you so much for painting with me. I hope you had fun with this, and I hope you allow yourself to explore and to look at maybe fine art outside of a canvas and paint, and see where it takes you. What can be considered that way. Thank you so much for painting with me. If you need any of these supplies, you can find them at letsmakeart.com. Michael, always a pleasure.
Anytime.
We'll see you guys next time. Bye.